Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And we have some very interesting topics in the news. This you can't make up. You couldn't make this up in a B movie. They have classified documents have been found. They actually were found before the November midterms, but now have just come to light. So there's classified documents in the Biden library, which suggests maybe what comic books, but that's another issue. Puts obviously Garland in an unbelievably precarious position. In fact, Alan Dershowitz commented that it's virtually impossible to indict Trump at this point because of that. And then one kind of humorous note before I get your comments is that in his rebuttal, again, Biden can't help himself to, it's to say, spin some Pinocchios, mention the fact that in between his tenure as VP and president, he was a professor at UPenn. And I was an NBA star. Go ahead, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, I mean, the hypocrisy here is tremendous.
And the
of course,
underreporting.
the liberal media keeps saying, oh, well, this is apples and oranges. It's very different. And they're right about that. It is very different because the documents that were found in Mar-a-Lago, first of all, they were delivered to Mar-a-Lago by the National Archives. So the government brought them over. They were secured in Trump's office, which had not only Secret Service protection, but private security as well. On top of all of that, Donald Trump, as president, had the ability to declassify these documents.
All
now,
true.
How does that compare to what happened with Biden? Biden's documents were mixed in with non-classified materials. They were not delivered to this site by the government. They were taken by apparently Biden, or at least an aide of Biden. They were not in a secure location. The office was used by multiple people, so they had no security there. And in fact, these offices were used by a think tank that Biden participated in. So
isn't that an oxymoron, though? A think tank with Biden?
A think tank, yes. And just as important, as vice president, Joe Biden did not have the ability to declassify documents. So, yes, it's apples and oranges, but unlike what the liberal media wants you to believe, what Biden has done is much worse.
100% agree. Also find it very interesting. The president of UPenn got a plum assignment, speaking of fruit, some overseas assignment. So she's out of pocket now. Can't be reached for comment.
Of course not. And something else to keep in mind is that when the government went after the documents that Trump had, yes, Trump fought them on it over whether or not he would turn them over. But when the Biden documents were discovered, they completely covered it up. The only reason it came out is because somebody leaked it to CBS News. And the predominant theory on this, it was leaked by somebody Biden should be running for re-election.
Very interesting. We'll see how it plays out. As I'm preparing for the podcast, did check. CNN did run the story, and so did CBS on their website. So we'll see how this is. I think something.
Well, again, CBS are the ones. CBS
no,
is
I understand
that
but
broke the story.
Yeah, but
it was also mentioned on The View. And Joy Behar had a great comment where she says, well, we know Trump is a criminal, so we can't believe him. But Joe Biden is a truthful person. We can give him the benefit of the doubt. Really? Washington Post gave Joe Biden 5 perpetual Pinocchios because he's incapable of telling the truth.
Incapable of telling the truth.
Joy Behar is going, oh, but we can trust Joe Biden.
Could you please help me out with something, Dr. Lopkin? What would be the demographic makeup of anyone that would watch The View. First of all, unemployed because it's on at like I don't know what 11 or something. Other than that, it can't be exactly Mensa candidates
No, I'm guessing their core demographic is unemployed, uninformed, um,
and generally stupid.
and probably I'm guessing most of the people that turn on the View are actually turning it on to see just how stupid a comment is going to be made, because there's never any value to what they're saying.
No, but when you're unemployed, you have tons of time on your hand.
Right.
Anyway, we also need to focus on Biden after 2.5 years. Finally visits the border, even though it was a sanitized visit.
Finally visited the border, did not talk to any border agents, did not talk to any migrants, did not talk to anyone that had any information about what was really going on, and in fact, refused to allow the Republican representative from El Paso to accompany them. This was political grandstanding. He didn't learn anything, he didn't see anything, and based on his conversation with the Mexican president, has no intention of doing anything.
100%. I think it's part of a strategy that, again, researching for the podcast of him trying to pivot at least the optics of a pivot to more of a center right party,
Yes,
center left
he
person.
has
Yes.
he has to look like he's moving back to the center, otherwise he doesn't stand a chance in the general election in 2024. Now, I don't know anybody that's going to believe he's truly centrist at this
Oh no, I
point.
disagree. I think the View viewers might
Oh yes,
take that. Yes,
that's well, but they don't matter if they think it's he's centrist. They'll vote for him either way.
exactly. Yes.
So yeah, he's trying to look more centrist. He's failing miserably. And I think it's going to be very interesting what all of the investigations into weaponizing government agencies, into his business dealings with Hunter, and the new committee dealing with China will all find out about what Biden has really been up to.
I think it's not going to be a fun upcoming year for Mr. Biden. I believe there's beyond the investigations. I think there's um, more than signs of a economic slowdown, which people, no matter what, even in this woke era, still vote with their pocketbooks, and also even consumer debt and other indicators, and the employment picture, like real employment. So I think there's going to be some headwinds on top of the investigations, and his inability to address any of these in a cohesive manner or a coherent manner will spell his demise if Trump does not run.
Well, I think even if Trump does run, because I don't think Trump is going to be able to get past the primary.
I
If
mean, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I mean Trump being the Republican nominee.
Oh no, if Trump is the Republican nominee, he will hand the White House back to the Democrats.
No
There's no
question
doubt
about it.
about that.
No doubt. Yes. Okay, we agree with that. So it would be interesting. A fake border visit, very interesting. In the political arena again, McCarthy finally, I think the 15th go round, finally got the speakership of the House. I think it's a good thing for the Republican Party. Not that I'm a huge fan of McCarthy, but this chaos again indicates inability to lead and to govern. So that's in the rearview mirror. Some of the concessions actually weren't all that bad. I think he's out of the gate. I like exactly what he did. McCarthy stripped Swallow, Schiff, the lying, you know what, and Omar, the anti Semitic, anti Israeli pig, of their seats.
Yeah, just as he said they would. And the chaos at the Capitol did look ridiculous. But if you really think about it, this is what democracy is. And the big problem most people has was, well, why didn't they do this behind closed doors? Why are they showing how this is going on? Joe Biden campaigned that he would be the most transparent president ever. Well, guess what? This is transparency. This is how the sausage is made. If you don't want to see it, get out of the kitchen.
Agreed,
But
but it's both parties though have been so san. You know, conventions used to be a la 1968 Democratic. I mean, everything's been so sanitized that seeing the sausage is so alien on both sides to most people.
absolutely. But I think it was good that people saw it. And the concessions that came out of it were
Okay.
overwhelmingly positive for the American people. Because some of the only concession that I have a problem with is where the Freedom Caucus demanded to be put on committees. You don't do that. That's, it's traditionally done by seniority. That's the only one I have a problem with. But some of the other concessions, and you'll notice mainstream media didn't talk about what any of these concessions were. It's blocking 1,000-page omnibus bills. So it's going to provide more transparency into how the government is actually spending taxpayer money.
No, that's a very good point and something that needs further light on. I think these 2,000 page bills is just camouflage. It's a centrifuge
Yes,
for what's
it's a
real. It's no reason why it can't be 5 pages. Let's cut the shit,
no,
and then
it's a way
follow up
to
with the
hide
details.
what the legislation is. It goes back to Obamacare, where Nancy Pelosi said, well, we have to pass it to see what's in it. No, what this concession is saying is no, everybody needs to know what's in it before it even comes up for
I
a
like
vote.
it very much, no matter who put it through. I think it's an excellent
Right.
idea.
Another
And
another
go ahead.
concession that was made is they are going to push for a vote on term limits for Congress people. Again, to benefit the American people. And the other big concession that I found interesting was changes to rules on how the House is run. Now, most people, especially in mainstream media, were saying, well, how dare you change the rules? These rules have been in place forever. This is tradition. No, the rules they are pulling back were put in place by Nancy Pelosi to solidify her power as speaker. All they're doing is rolling those back to how how the House used to run before Nancy Pelosi.
The only thing I would actually be for as well, an additional concession, would be getting her mural out of the friggin' congressional hall and maybe in where it belongs in a pawn shop.
Yeah, but I mean, so all of these concessions benefit the American people, despite the chaos that it took to push them through. On top of that, you've got the new committees. You've got the China committee, which the House passed all except for 61 Democrats voted for this new committee. So this was massively bipartisan, and it's going to investigate everything that's going on with China. And I think that's going to be a big problem for Joe Biden because he's basically been in China's back pocket.
No question, it's going to be a huge problem. Speaking of problems, we have two political figures that are both kind of on the downbeat, if you will. The first is Joe Manchin. I think we gave him some kind of an award maybe a year ago, some patriotic tribute. We've obviously taken back, but Joe Manchin has been cited as the most vulnerable Democratic senator running for re-election in 2024. Your comments, I believe it's duly earned.
It is. He sold out his people when he believed Chuck Schumer.
How do you say stupidity? There
I
you
mean, Chuck Schumer promised him the world in exchange for his vote on the Green New Deal. And of course, Schumer did not have the ability to make any of this get past the House. So it was halted in its path, but not until after Manchin voted in favor of the Green New Deal. So he was played for a fool. He threw his constituents under the bus. And so he deserves to be vulnerable.
I
What
think
I
he's
find
huge trouble.
what I find interesting though is we've already started seeing senators talk about Democratic senators talk about the fact that they may retire in 2024. And you're talking about a lot of Democrats who are apparently in very tough districts that they are not expected to win in 2024, so they are retiring.
Yeah, I did. That's a very good point, by the way, because the Republicans were not in an enviable position in 2022. That's completely reversed because it's the Democrats that have to defend, not the reverse. So that will be extremely interesting. Hopefully, Feinstein will also be hitting the road if she can actually find the road. Um, we also have another political figure that I believe is on the downswing, as the FAA basically essentially melts down. We have Mayor Pete. He was already in a precarious situation. Now, I think that puts, no pun intended, fuel on the fire, flying with his, I think it's his husband, to some event in an Osprey, which is the least fuel efficient. It's a military vehicle. He has no right being on it, to a special event. Your thoughts, Dr. Lopkin, first on the FAA meltdown and then on Mayor Petey,
Well, yeah, the software and hardware used for the FAA
like
operations, and
1940.
yeah, it's way out of date. And just to be clear, the system we're talking about is the NOTAM system. This is a communications platform so that pilots can see what the conditions are at airports they're going to, in the sky between the destination. So it's important, but it's not crucial. I mean, they literally used to do this with phone calls. But the NOTAM system, which is by the way called the Notice to Air Missions, because this is what the FAA thought was so important. Instead of upgrading their systems, they changed the name of it from Notice to Airmen so they could be gender neutral. That was more important than actually fixing an outdated system.
Of
So
course. Does that surprise you?
of course not. I mean, in all fairness, it doesn't cost anything to change the name, and it's going to cost quite a bit of money to upgrade this system. And this is not the only FAA system that's out of date. We're dealing with air traffic control systems that are out of date. These all need to be brought up
Well,
to
we're to also
speed.
be talking about our missile defense infrastructure. That's also outdated, along with some of those missiles are older than you, Dr. Lopkin.
Yes, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because the missile launch systems go back to the 1960s. And this actually gives them extra security because they're not hooked up to any computer network. They're not hooked up to the internet. There's no way these can be hacked without somebody actually breaking into the facility and physically activating
Yeah,
it.
but they're not gender neutral.
Yeah, well,
That's an issue. There you go. Now
but
let's
so
getting
with
back
this,
to.
yeah, so with this FAA failure, this is another black mark on Mayor Pete.
I think
I mean,
he's done. Not
I
done, but he's close to done. He was the little darling of the Democratic Party, the up and comer, extremely articulate, no question about it. He's just effed up again and again and again, totally
but
tone deaf, totally incompetent, and I'm not so sure he's not Asta Nuega, baby.
no, I think his political career is done. I think when Biden leaves the White House, Mayor Pete will leave with him and he will go on to become a commentator on MSNBC because he's certainly not going to be elected to any position. Besides this FAA debacle, and he was already getting bipartisan criticism for the cancellations of airline flights due to bad weather over the holidays. we can't forget that during the supply chain crisis, he
He
was
was on
on
maternity
maternity
leave.
leave. During the potential railroad strike, he was on vacation in Europe. He cannot name anything he's accomplished, and his missteps have been amazing. And I think, quite frankly, most of the Biden administration is done for. There's a book coming out that details how aggravated Joe Biden is with Kamala Harris and her performance. And this is what happens when you name people to positions because
Checking the
they
boxes.
check boxes instead of actually being
And
qualified.
let's be
Now,
clear,
I guarantee you,
Mayor Pete checked boxes as well.
yes,
He
Mayor.
ran a friggin' small little city, a schlock hole, by the way, and had no real accomplishment, but he checked the box. Let's
And
be honest.
I guarantee you, they could, if all they wanted to do was find a homosexual, they could have found more qualified ones.
I'm sure they could have, no question about it. Uh, Again, in the political arena, uh, Trump Trump's taxes. I think that's a lead balloon. I don't think it did anything.
No, the Trump's taxes were released. The liberal media went nuts for about a day and a half, and that was the end of it because their taxes, like, oh, he didn't make as much as he said he did. Well, everybody minimize. They take as many deductions as they can. They offset profits as much as they can. That's how taxes are done.
Yeah,
So
if you're a Democratic liberal, you would have no idea about that because you don't know anything about the private sector.
that's true.
You would have no concept of that
But
whatsoever. So
there
another
there
lead
was,
balloon.
yeah, there was no smoking gun. There was no massive information that they could glean from it. It was basically just another witch hunt that fell apart.
Okay, but why did Trump screw it up? And just let me
Why?
hear me
Because
out for
he
a second.
screws everything up.
He screws up instead of lying and saying you're under audit, which was a lie, he could have just said, and no one would have given a shit. I wouldn't, because it's true. I don't have any obligation to release my taxes. It's just putting ammunition in the hands of my enemies. And that's it. And anyone would have understood. MSNBC
Th-
would be a week long program. I get it. But who cares? They're going to talk that crap anyway. Just
Anyway,
be honest.
okay,
Be honest.
I do have to correct you. He was under audit. The IRS did confirm that. The lie he told was that he couldn't release the taxes
That's
because of
I'm
the
sorry. Yeah,
audit.
yeah, you're correct. But see,
But yeah,
again,
but the
using
IRS
that,
said, yeah, that he could have released it whether or not he was under audit or not. But it's the same story over and over again. He can't get out of the way of his own ego. And I think he's finally going to have to get out of the way of his own ego because at this point I don't see any way for him to win the primary. So he's going to have to accept that his days in the Oval Office have come to an end, and he can't even be a political power broker because he screwed that up with the November elections.
no question about it. And I think you talk about his demise. Yeah, he was under attack from the day one or before day one, but he did it to him. It was a self-inflicted death. His last year in office was a horror show. Not not from policy, but from his optics.
From personality and from his behavior. If he had just stopped, taken a breath, if somebody had taken away his phone so he would have stopped tweeting, you know, that would have been all it took. If he had just stayed on topic and talked about policy and not taken everything so personally and not lashed out at people,
Yeah, if I went
he
on a
would have been
vegan
fine.
diet, that
But
would be good too.
he couldn't do it.
No, it's impossible. Um, Speaking of impossible, it's impossible for AOC to say anything coherent. There was a initiative for the government to, and this is how crazy the Biden administration is, to basically take away gas stoves.
Okay, no, I gotta correct you on that. It was not the Biden administration. This came from Hochul, governor of New York. and they are starting to ban, they have announced they are banning gas stoves in all new construction in New York. The Biden administration actually came out and said this is a bad idea. We do not support this.
But someone who does support it is AOC. She said that gas stoves contribute to cognitive decline, and as we talked about before the actual podcast, she must have at least 5 or 6 stoves in her dwelling.
Right. Who knows more about cognitive decline than AOC? She's practically brain dead.
Now, is
And
her career pretty much gone?
I don't think it's completely gone, but it's teetering because if the government actually does ban all government officials from using TikTok, and it looks like they might because they have proven that it's a security risk, that's going to be the nail in her coffin because she can't go on Twitter anymore and lie about things. So she's left on Instagram, which she doesn't use much. She's been big on TikTok and Twitter. So now that those platforms are taken away from her, she doesn't have that influence anymore. Now she's actually going to have to try to do her job, and it will be shown just how incompetent she is.
There's no question about that. I would say she's she's almost done.
Yeah.
I think she's almost done. Not quite done, but she went from rock star to I think there's starting to be crickets in the room. Um, let's see here. We have also the maybe the end of the free ride. You had Elon Musk at Twitter calling people back to work, and you have Iger at Disney saying that his employees need to be at work in the office at least 4 days a week. What's
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Employers are cracking down, saying enough is enough, come back to the office. And the fact of the matter is, productivity has been dropping. And that is a big part of why we're having so much inflation. And the companies know that they need to get people, at least part time, back into the office to get them working again. And Apple has been fighting this. Tim Cook has wanted to bring people back, and his programmers are saying, no, we're doing great work outside of the office. We don't need to be in the office. Anybody who uses Apple products will tell you the quality of the products has fallen. It's dropping like a stone. Why? Because they don't have the oversight of having the designers in the office and having the programmers in the office. So they're claiming they can do great work outside the office, but they're proving that they can't.
Yeah, I think it's something called collaboration, team dynamics. That's out the window. Yeah, it's not the same on Skype. Sorry to burst anyone's bubble, but I think that chicken's already roosted, as they say. Let's see. On an uplifting note, after 40 years of screwing around with a space shuttle, NASA has indicated that I think in part because of the threat of China's intentions, wants to pursue a permanent moon base. Your thoughts? I think it's excellent
I
and
think
well overdue.
it's certainly well overdue. As any science fiction fan will tell you, we were supposed to have a moon base up there in 1999. Um,
There you go. Good show, by the way.
right, little reference to the Space 1999 show for our younger viewers who've never heard of it. But this was supposed to be the plan way back when we were going to have a moon base, a lab to do experiments. Furthermore, there are rare, what we call rare earth elements, but they're not necessarily on Earth. The elements that China right now monopolizes that we need for battery packs, for electric vehicles, for solar panels. These are in abundance on the moon. So if we can find a way to mine these and ship them down, or even better, get a chance to study them more and be able to duplicate them artificially so that we don't have to destroy Earth and Moon mining these things.
But you bring up moon mining is economically feasible. I mean, you can't mine on Mars. That's ridiculous. No matter what it's just economically unfeasible. But the moon's only 250,000 miles away. It's totally feasible to have a
It
mining operation on the moon. It's totally feasible.
They've already proved it is economically feasible to be able to mine on the moon. Even better, they've been able to work out ways that it's economically feasible to mine asteroids, which that's great because all the asteroids are rocks floating around space. There's
The
no,
rocks floating around AOC's head, I think.
there you go. So
Speaking of
this can open up a huge resource, and we need to have our people on the moon before China can exploit this.
no question about it, in the realm of economics with corporate layoffs, not Walmart layoffs, but substantial job layoffs seem to be, at least the momentum seems to be indicating they may be on the rise. There's an explosion of fake job offering operations intended, including interviews. I mean, going the full Monty, if you will, with the intent of getting people's, obviously, the kind of information you need to disclose in a formal job interview is quite risque. So basically, it's a ID theft operations. Have you heard about that, Doctor Lopkin?
Yeah, this
And if
is a
you have, what's your thoughts?
yeah, this is a massive criminal enterprise. They are creating fake job listings on job boards, as you said, going as far to have you fill out applications, have an interview. There are no jobs. This is just a method to get your personal information. Because when you fill out a job application, you're filling out name, address, social security number, phone number. People give out all sorts of information during a job
Well, that's how they do
interview.
background
Uh,
checks. I mean, my
Right.
God, yeah.
And they are collecting this information, stealing people's identities, stealing their credit, and in some cases, stealing their bank accounts.
So everyone out there in the carnivore listening audience should be aware and do the due diligence before you jump. Obviously, if you're between jobs, you become very anxious, but sometimes a little teaspoon full of precaution is a good thing to do.
Yes, before you go on any job interview, go on LinkedIn, look up what you can find about the company. Go on Glassdoor, look up what you can find about the company. Contact the Better Business Bureau and get information on the company. Generally, these scams are not listed in all these places, and you'll be able to figure out, wait a minute, this may be too good to be true.
Well said. Um, on kind of an interesting note, it's been happening for a while as China had a policy of the one baby policy. India is now poised to surpass China as the world's most populous nation.
Yeah, this is amazing because I mean, the population of India is huge to begin with, but the land mass is not. I mean, compared to China, it's a much smaller
Much
area
smaller.
that all of these people are crammed into. And I think that's going to cause so many problems for I mean, we've been talking about overpopulation here in the US going back to the 1970s, and we've got much more space, many more natural resources than a place like India. I don't see how that is sustainable.
It's not sustainable, and it's also a bigger problem because when they talk about India, they really mean India Pakistan. Again, they've had 3 or 4 wars. They're both nuclear ready countries who've come close in the early 2000s to a nuclear conflict. And the other part of it that's troubling is that India is a huge emitter of greenhouse gases. Again, everyone criticized Trump about getting it out of the Paris Accords, but we're not the one. Of course, we pollute. I get it, but no, it's China and India that are the biggest perpetuators of greenhouse gases.
That's true. And also, most people don't realize this, but India is a very close ally of Russia and China. They're not a great ally of the United States.
Never been. Nope.
People always say, well, why do we do so much with Pakistan? They obviously don't like us. That is was our hedge against India cozying up to Russia and China. So this means that, again, the most populous country is not an ally of the US.
100%. And from recent developments in America, countries are making decisions who to align themselves with. And there's not a lot of stuff in the United States. This is not 1961 that's going to compel, let's just say, countries on the fence to join hands with America. I think that's a reasonable assumption. Uh, and last week, you brought up a development in Virginia having to do with education, and very interesting. And I believe, or I know you know more about it than I do, which won't be the first time. But it's expanded, hasn't it? It's actually
It
exploded in terms of its ramifications.
It has. We talked about one school in Virginia that held back information about national merit scholarships from the students that earned them because they didn't want other students to feel bad about themselves. Well, now it turns out it's not one school that's doing. There's at least three schools in the same district in Fairfax County, and the Virginia Attorney General is opening up massive investigations because they also suspect it may go beyond these three schools. So the school board in this district made the decision to essentially cut off high achievers at the knees in order to make those that weren't putting the work in feel better about
And
themselves.
it wasn't all
And
just
they say,
about a
well,
trophy, though. There's also financial underpinnings to this, and we talked about it last week. Scholarships, access to top-notch universities.
yes, they
I'm
kept
saying
them
lawsuit.
from they kept the information from them until it was too late to apply for certain other scholarships, until it was after some college applications needed to be in, so they couldn't put on their college application that they were a merit scholar. What's really interesting is that this particular school district paid $800,000 for a diversity consultant.
Of
And
course.
apparently this is where this came from. The result of this diversity consultant has been massive, massive discrimination against Asian Americans and Jewish Americans.
Well, that's happening in the higher education system as well. Let me ask you a question, Dr. Lobkin. Are they in China and India, are they worried about offending their non high achievers? Just a
No,
thought. There you go.
they do not care about offending non-high achievers. In fact, China will actively ridicule them in order to spur on them to try to achieve.
But doesn't that hurt their ego? Come on, what's going on here? Do they have
Yeah,
safe rooms?
they they don't have safe rooms. They don't
It's outrageous.
care. Your feelings are
Oh God, this
irrelevant.
is
And
outrageous.
guess what? This is destroying our country because we are literally all these diversity programs are just switching who's being discriminated against. They're not solving any problems.
Well, they never
And
do it. It's
the
not just about
woke
education. It's about everywhere. I mean, there's certain. I know people that have had situations where there was talk about underachievers, non-achievers, and they went to HR, and HR said you cannot fire this person. Just telling you how it is.
yeah, that it happens in corporate America. Look, this is why we have Kamala Harris as a vice president. I mean, clearly she didn't get there on her merits. Even Joe Biden has been saying she's incompetent.
Then that's
This is
something.
what is
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
destroying America.
That is an achievement, Dr. Lopkin. When you have Joe Biden saying you're incompetent, that is an achievement. You are
Yeah,
truly
it's
incompetent.
absolutely amazing. And it's time this stops. We need to celebrate achievement. It doesn't matter what race or religion you are, or what gender, or whatever else you believe. It's about what you are doing. Take the initiative and achieve. That is what is going to get you ahead, not
And
some
actually,
program.
no question about that. And we talk about the moon. Well, guess what? During the 60s, 50s, and 60s, it wasn't a woke agenda. We had a real emphasis on the sciences because we were behind the Russians. And guess what? We caught up. Now I'm not so sure we're capable of that. But Dr. Lopkin, another good edition of Carnivore Bites, and the venues you can hear us are multiple, aren't they, Dr. Lopkin?
They are. You can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at the Carnivore Radio website, xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
I thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and I thank our listeners.
We'll see you next time.